Hello everyone, welcome back. You're watching WION World is One. This is World DNA, the show that gets you ahead of the rest. I'm Shivan Chandna.
And I'm Jyotsna Kumar, and on the show today, the Kremlin has warned the West that any decision to allow Ukraine to strike Russia with long-range Western missiles will deepen what it calls the direct involvement of the US and Europe in the war and would trigger a response from Moscow. Now, this comes as British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is in Washington to meet Biden. Now, we'll get you all the latest and what the talks will entail on the show today.
Also on the show, we bring you more updates on what's happening on the Israeli-Hamas front. The Israeli military has named 9 men, it said, were Hamas militants killed in Gaza airstrikes that the UN Palestinian Refugee Agency said had left 6 of its staffers dead. The military said 3 of the Hamas men had doubled as UNRWA workers, and the attack has gained worldwide condemnation, with the US concerned about the airstrikes on the UN-run school-turned-shelter for the displaced Palestinians in central Gaza. We will be tracking those developments closely for you as well. For now, let's get started with the headlines. This is World DNA.
Russian President Vladimir Putin sends strong message to NATO countries on Ukraine, warns West letting Kiev use long-range weapons will mean NATO would be at war with Russia.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer responds to Russian President Putin's message, says Putin started the war in Ukraine and he could end it at any time.
Donald Trump rules out another U.S. presidential debate before November's election. Kamala Harris says they owe voters another one. Latest polls suggest the race to White House remains extremely tight.
The commander of Israel's military surveillance agency, Unit 8200, has announced his resignation, accepting responsibility for failing to prevent the October 7th attacks by Hamas.
U.S. President Joe Biden to host leaders of India, Australia, and Japan for Quad Summit in his hometown next weekend. Summit to focus on Indo-Pacific cooperation. White House says India will host next Quad.
India's National Security Advisor Ajit Doval meets Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi on the sidelines of the BRICS NSA meeting, underscores need to maintain peace and tranquility in border areas and respecting the line of actual control.
The European Central Bank cuts its interest rates for the second time this year as economy falter. With inflation nearing its 2% target, the ECB signaled more rate cuts ahead as economic growth continues to slow.
The hearing into Manchester City's 115 alleged breaches of Premier League financial regulations is set to begin on Monday. City have been charged with breaking financial fair play rules over a 9-year period between 2009 and 2018. Russian President Vladimir Putin has warned the West that letting Ukraine use longer-range weapons would put NATO at war with Russia directly.
Absolutely. Now, this stark warning comes as U.S. and U.K. officials discuss Kiev's request to ease rules on firing Western weapons into Russia. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has been pleading with allies for months for the use of long-range U.S. ATACMS and British Storm Shadows deep into Russian territory. Putin has now said such a move would drag the NATO countries directly into the war and that Russia would be forced to take appropriate decisions based on the new threats.
Речь идет не о том, чтобы разрешать украинскому режиму наносить удары по России этим оружием или не разрешать. Речь идет о том, чтобы принять решение о том, что страны НАТО напрямую участвуют в военном конфликте или нет. Если это решение будет принято, это будет означать не что иное, как прямое участие стран НАТО, Соединенных Штатов, европейских стран в войне на Украине. Это их прямое участие.
Putin's statement comes after U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken visited Ukraine. Blinken said that the decision on long-range missiles is up for review and reassured that Washington will adjust and adapt as necessary. But the Pentagon has said that the restrictions on Kiev's use of US-supplied weapons still stand despite the pleas and promises. The Pentagon spokesperson also called Putin's words irresponsible and dangerous.
This kind of nuclear saber rattling isn't new. It's very irresponsible. It's dangerous. You've heard Secretary Austin highlight the fact that this is not the kind of language that a nuclear-armed, large military country that's nuclear-armed with a large military should be saying. All that to say, we have not seen anything at this point that would indicate that we need to adjust our strategic force posture. So we'll continue to monitor that, but at this point, there's been no change to our posture.
U.S. President Joe Biden is set to discuss Ukraine's request in a White House meeting with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Starmer has responded to Putin's remarks, saying it was Russia who started the war in the first place and can end it straight away.
As Ukraine awaits the nod, Kiev continues its incursion into Russia's Kursk border region. But Zelensky has now acknowledged that Moscow's troops were indeed striking back.
Let's talk about the battlefront. Russia has begun a counteroffensive operation aimed at taking back territory from Ukrainian troops.
Now, the purported visuals from the battlefield as well as testimonies from bloggers monitoring the situation all point to heavy fighting. According to Major General April Laudinov, who commands Chechnya's Akhmat Special Forces fighting in Kursk, Russian troops have gone on the offensive. The Russians are reportedly taking back control of about 10 settlements. In Kursk, Laudinov is also deputy head of the Russian Defense Ministry's military political department. He said, and I'm going to quote here, "The situation is good for us. A total of about 10 settlements in the Kursk region have been liberated," quote unquote. Now, additionally, new footage circulating online shows Russian troops pushing Ukrainians back in Kursk. Pro-Russian channels on Telegram released video clips that they claim show Russia's 51st Guard Regiment near a settlement called Snagost.
The Russian forces are said to have taken several villages on the west of Russia from the area that Ukraine said to have carved out in Russia. The Russian Defense Ministry said troops had defeated Ukrainian units at a number of villages, but there was no independent confirmation or immediate comment from Ukraine.
Russia has yet to confirm the counteroffensive, ever since Ukraine sent thousands of its heavily armed troops across the border and into Russian territory. According to the Russian military, Ukrainian casualties have surpassed 10,000 during the month-long incursion.
Ukraine weakened its battlefield position, especially in East Ukraine. Ukraine hoped that its Kursk operation would force Russia to pull troops from eastern Ukraine. But instead of pulling troops from the Donbas front line, Russia continued to push forward with Ukrainian troops focused on the Russian region.
Now, Pokrovsk is a logistical hub. This is one area where Russia has been directing all its forces towards, an industrial powerhouse, and it is seen as a gateway between eastern and central Ukraine. If the city falls, Ukraine not just loses supply lines in the entire region, but Russian forces acquire a launchpad for mounting more assaults, this time deeper into Ukraine. Now, this means easy control of other strategic Ukrainian cities as well, along with Luhansk and the Donetsk province, which comprises the eastern Ukraine's Donbas region and whose control remains the main objective of Russia's war.
Now, Ukraine could not afford to lose Pokrovsk. Yet, knowing how close the Russian threat is in the east, Ukraine pushed on with its Kursk objective in the hopes of using it as a bargaining chip.
If earlier Moscow was ready for peace talks with conditions, now it isn't. Russian President Vladimir Putin has dismissed the idea of peace talks in the immediate aftermath of Ukraine's Kursk raid.
All right, to discuss more on this, we are being joined by John Erith from Washington, D.C. He is a senior policy director for the Center for Arms Control and Non-Proliferation in Washington. He is also the former member of the U.S. delegation to NATO. Thank you so much for taking your time and joining us today. Now, let me begin by asking you, Putin has given a clear warning saying we will make appropriate decisions based on the threats that will be created for us. Now, what kind of a Russian response do you think we can anticipate? Is this a rhetoric or it's a clear warning?
We have heard many such warnings from Russian leaders over the past 2.5 years. There was a warning if any military aid would go to Ukraine at all. There was a warning if the aid was not strictly defensive in nature. There was a warning if tanks were provided. So this is yet another in a series. The rhetoric is perhaps a little bit stronger at this time. And because we are dealing with a nuclear-armed power in Russia, it is well to take such warnings very seriously. But that's why the President of the United States has a very difficult job. He has to balance the risks of authorizing the use of weapons at military targets in Russia with the possibilities that Russia will take some other kind of action. It's difficult to understand what kind of action Russia would take against NATO countries. NATO is very well defended, but the risk is there.
Mr. Erith, as you mentioned, that the rhetoric is stronger this time, and even a little earlier, Putin made it clear that there will be no peace talks now after the Kursk incursion happened. Now, at this point, now it is a lot of reports are suggesting that US is almost on the brink of giving that permission to Ukraine to use those long-range weapons inside Russia. It is assumed that those permissions will be given with restrictions, that these are the areas that you can target and perhaps these are the areas that you cannot. But who's to say what or how Ukraine will be using those weapons, given the nature of the war? Because Russia is not holding back, so Ukraine will consider itself, justified in not holding back either. Do you feel that raises tensions for the West even more?
It's very difficult to speculate on the nature of confidential discussions between governments, so I will not do that. I can say from a military point of view, there are obvious things that Ukraine could target, military targets, such as command and control facilities, troop assembly areas, transportation hubs, things like that, that would be high-value targets. These are high-value weapons. They're limited in supply. They're expensive. So the traditional military doctrine would be not to fire them blankly against muddy villages, but to hit such high-value military targets at command.
Right. Talking of diplomatically, where does the peace talks now stand? We have countries like India, trying to solve this conflict, maybe diplomatically, but where does this warning leave the peace talks now?
The peace talks are about where they have been for 2.5 years, which is to say at a standstill. Russia refuses to discuss terms of peace with Ukraine unless Ukraine surrenders significant portions of its territory. Ukraine refuses to discuss peace while Russia is occupying territory. Those basic conditions have not changed. Both sides have indicated that when they do, they will be open to peace talks. Many nations, the initiative of Switzerland was particularly notable, have indicated that they are willing to facilitate such talks, but we have not entered the conditions yet where that would be likely.
Definitely, times seem to be getting more and more tense as the war is very much into its third year. One would have assumed by now it would start settling down at some point, but it doesn't seem so, at least not in the near future. Thank you so much for joining in, sir. That was John Erith joining us from Washington, D.C. Always a pleasure hearing your thoughts and your analysis on current issues.
Thank you very much.
Moving on, massive Ocean 2024 naval drills stretching from Pacific to Baltics and Caspian Sea are being conducted by the Russian Navy in coordination with the Chinese counterparts.
Well, the war games are scheduled from September 10th till 16th with over 400 warships, submarines and auxiliary vessels, about 120 aircraft and 90,000 personnel taking part. Take a look at these visuals.
Okay, moving on. The United States says it is in touch with Israel for more information on strikes in Gaza that kill staffers of the UN Palestinian Refugee Agency, UNRWA.
White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre said that the U.S. was concerned about the airstrikes on the UN-run school-turned-shelter for displaced Palestinians in central Gaza. Dozens, including 6 UNRWA staffers, were killed in the attack.
So what I can say is obviously we're aware of the IDF strike in Gaza, and we are indeed concerned about their reports of civilian casualties. So we are concerned about that. We're in touch with our Israeli counterparts to get more information in what happened.
The attack has drawn global condemnation. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said the strikes were totally unacceptable. Also, European Union Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell expressed his outrage over the strikes, calling them a disregard of the basic principles of international humanitarian law.
More than 11 months since Israel launched a military campaign in the Strip, United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, described Gaza's economy in ruins. They highlighted that the economy has shrunk to less than a sixth of its pre-war size.
Also, unemployment has tripled, the agency said, talking about the occupied West Bank. In the northern West Bank, Israeli forces have been conducting a series of operations for the past 2 weeks. In the latest, Israeli forces have withdrawn from Palestinian refugee camp in Tulkarm.
The report we share with you today portrays a region in great economic distress, with collapsing GDP, widespread poverty, and soaring unemployment. This now affects all the occupied Palestinian territory, impacting people in Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem, and it is putting a severe strain on basic services.
Shifting focus to the north side now, 3 people were killed in an Israeli strike on the outskirts of Lebanon's Nabateh, according to state-run national news agency. The strike, as per the agency, hit 2 motorcycles on the main Nabateh road and hit a car driving by.
Meanwhile, a car explosion in Israel's Ramallah killed 4 people and wounded an additional 8. Police said the explosion is believed to be linked to criminal activity in the city and is not being investigated as a terrorist attack.
The United Kingdom understood the need for a healthcare system long before most of its counterparts. In 1948, the country established the National Health Service,
or the NHS. As many know it now, the plan was to provide free services to the entire population, but for decades, the NHS has been in a state of crisis. Their services are free but not accessible.
Now, this year, ahead of elections, the Labour Party promised an overhaul to the NHS. And within 2 months, the Prime Minister is talking about that change. Prime Minister Keir Starmer has said that the NHS needs major reforms and not just more funding.
Once we know how we're going to fix it, that is when we start thinking how long would it take to fix it. My guess will be somewhere around 5 years up to 8 years to get the NHS back on its feet, based on the previous work, as you remember, around the millennium, when the NHS plan came out in 2002.
The government says it is working on a 10-year plan to fix the health service. Not much is known about the plan. What we know is that there will be focus on 3 things. First, using more technology to create a digital NHS. Second, shift more care out of hospitals and into communities. And third, move from treating sickness to focusing on prevention.
The latest row was sparked by an independent report on the system. It is by Ara Darzi, a surgeon who sits in the House of Lords. NHS has been in a state of crisis. The COVID-19 pandemic had a grave impact. Private hospitals were drafted in to help with that pressure, and UK is still feeling its impact. Prime Minister Keir Starmer was quick to blame the previous government for the collapse.
The last government broke the NHS. Until this morning, we didn't know the full scale of the damage, which is laid bare in the report. Even Lord Darzi, with all his years of experience, is shocked by what is discovered. It is unforgivable, and people have every right to be angry.
After over 2 months of political gridlock in France, it appears that the country is finally getting a new government.
Well, there has been a major wait for this. The new Prime Minister, Michel Barnier, revealed the timeline for this. It's expected to happen next week during an interaction with the media earlier in the day.
Next week, I'm going to form a government with serious ministers and a government that will be balanced, representative and plural. My political family, I'm very, very happy about that, and I'm going to meet them in Annecy, the senators and MPs. I have very friendly and warm relations with President Lachier, with Laurent Wauquiez, with Bruno Retailleau, and with the MPs who will be there. So there's no problem. Everyone will have their place.
It was only a few days back that President Macron announced Barnier as the new prime minister. Finding a prime minister who is accepted by all parties and does not face a no-confidence vote was the first challenge. The next is for Barnier to find a balance between all parties across the ideological spectrum when it comes to representation in the cabinet.
Now, to remind our viewers, the snap election is in July. It delivered a split mandate. No party secured a clear majority. The leftist New Popular Front alliance emerged on top, followed by Macron's centrist coalition ensemble, and far-right alliance led by Marine Le Pen's National Rally came third. Now, at the moment, several meetings are underway. Leaders across parties are eyeing a government portfolio, and Barnier has emphasized that he is open to work with lawmakers on the left or right. But the Prime Minister is on a tight deadline. The government is expected to present a draft government budget for the year 2025 on the 1st of October. President Faye of Senegal has dissolved the opposition-led parliament, making way for early legislative elections to roll out policies for the rest of his term.
In an evening address on state television, Faye said legislative elections would be held on November 17, 2024. The 44-year-old head of state said that it was time to start a new phase of his term.
I am dissolving the National Assembly to ask the sovereign people for the institutional means that will enable to give substance to the systemic transformation that I've promised them. Now more than ever, the time has come to give our 5-year term of the office a new timeline. Article 3 of our Constitution states that national sovereignty belongs to the people.
Faye also said that a pledge of a frank collaboration with the parliamentary majority was an illusion, and that his action would allow him to bring a systematic reform that he promised in the election.
The move by the president comes following the promises by Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko to dissolve National Assembly and launch a wide-ranging probe into government corruption. The action, however, remains hampered by the lack of a majority in Parliament. Faye won the presidential elections in March 2024 on a promise of radical change for the West African nation. The state head went to the elections with a manifesto to crack down on corruption and to introduce economic reforms, raising the hopes for young people in the country where 2/3 of the population is under 35 years of age. Accusing his predecessor, Macky Sall, of misusing public finances, Faye alleged willfully hidden excesses of spending. He also said that a report approved by Senegal's Court of Auditors would soon be published.
All right, well, it's time now for a quick back, but don't go anywhere.
This is World DNA. Of course, on the other side, we'll bring you more updates from the US. Donald Trump states that he will not participate in another debate against Kamala Harris ahead of the November 5th presidential elections in the United States. We'll bring you the complete report and the reasons that Trump is citing for this decision.
Also, on the other side, India and China have agreed to redouble efforts to ensure complete disengagement on the contested Himalayan frontier. This comes after India's National Security Advisor Ajit Doval met China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi in Russia. Do stay tuned for that.
This week on World of Africa, WHO says cholera deaths in Africa rose 71% last year as the geographic distribution of the outbreaks changed significantly from 2022 to 2023. What's causing this alarming rise? Algeria's poll body declares President Abdelmadjid Tebboune the overwhelming winner of Saturday's election. But a rival candidate alleges irregularities in the count as less than half of the registered voters cast their ballots. Mozambique okays Africa's largest mangrove restoration project, 200 million trees to be planted over 60 years. All this and more this week on World of Africa at these times.
Namaste. Hello friends. We did Dr. Subhash Chandra show, popularly known as DSC show, for 4 years from August 2014 to August 2018. 28 states of Bharat. Of course, we reached out to all of you in 190 countries across the world. The show was very successful. Each episode was being watched by almost 25 million people every week. For past 6 years, the demand of the show has never died down. People write to us, people ask for the show to restart again. Hence, we are beginning the show once again on All Z Network, also on WION, which is the global network channel from India. Again, thank you for your love and affection. See you soon at Subhash Chandra Show.
To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution, teachers and students, send an invitation to Juhi Jha at juhi@such.org.in.
As Diljit Dosanjh announces his India tour, we tell you about the craze of the global pop icon. Take a look at all the bands that have made a huge comeback and find out some lesser known facts about the Australian Rose, Nicole Kidman. All this and much more with me, Isha Hanspal, at these times only on WION E-Club.
Welcome back. You're watching World DNA with me, Joseph Kumar, and my colleague Shivan Janana. Let's start with the headlines first.
Russian President Vladimir Putin sends strong message to NATO countries on Ukraine, warns West letting Kiev use longer-range weapons inside Russia will mean NATO would be at war with Russia.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer responds to Russian President Putin's message, says Putin started the war in Ukraine and could end it anytime soon.
Donald Trump rules out another US presidential debate before November's election. Kamala Harris says they owe voters another one. Latest polls suggest the race to White House remains extremely tight.
The commander of Israel's military surveillance agency, Unit A200, has announced his resignation, accepting responsibility for failing to prevent the 7 October attacks by Hamas.
US President Joe Biden to host leaders of India, Australia and Japan for Quad Summit in his hometown next weekend. Summit to focus on Indo-Pacific cooperation. White House says India will host the next Quad.
India's National Security Advisor Ajay Doval meets Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi on the sidelines of the BRICS NSA meeting, underscores need to maintain peace and tranquility in border areas and respecting line of actual control.
The European Central Bank cut its interest rates for the second time this year as the economy falters. With inflation nearing its 2% target, the ECB signaled more rate cuts ahead as economic growth continues to slow.
The hearing into Manchester City's 115 alleged breaches of Premier League financial regulations is set to begin on Monday. City have been charged with breaking financial fair play rules over a 9-year period between 2009 and 2018.
Donald Trump has said that he will not participate in another debate against Kamala Harris ahead of the November 5th presidential elections.
Now, the Republican presidential nominee declared it on Truth Social, saying there will be no third debate. In a rally in Arizona's Tucson, Trump claimed he had a monumental victory against Kamala Harris in their first debate. He said he has discussed everything successfully in the last 2 presidential debates with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, so there is no need for another debate.
But when a prize fighter loses a fight, you've seen a lot of fights, right? The first words out of that fighter's mouth is, I want a rematch. I want a rematch. And that's what she said, I want a rematch. Polls clearly show that I won the debate against Comrade Kamala Harris.
However, Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris, speaking at a rally in the swing state of North Carolina shortly after Trump's post went live, called for another debate, saying that they owe it to the voters.
2 nights ago, Donald Trump and I had our first debate. And I believe we owe it to the voters to have another debate.
While Trump claimed that polls show he won the debate, several instant surveys showed that respondents thought Harris did better. Polls conducted after the debate suggest that the race remained very tight with both the candidates neck to neck in numbers.
Rasmussen reports latest online survey finds that 49% of likely US voters would vote for Trump, while 47% would vote for Harris. Just 1% say that they'd vote for some other candidate, and another 2% are undecided.
Whereas in one of the battleground states of Michigan, an insider advantage survey of 800 registered likely voters shows Donald Trump with a 1-point lead over Kamala Harris. The survey was conducted from September 11th through midday September 12th. Notably, in a previous insider advantage survey done between August 6th and 8th, Harris was leading by 2 points in Michigan.
According to a Reuters Ipsos poll conducted after the September 10th debate, Kamala Harris leads Donald Trump 47% to 42%. The two-day poll that closed on Thursday showed Harris with a 5 percentage point lead among registered voters, just above the 4-point advantage that she had over Trump in an August 21st to 28th Reuters Ipsos poll.
Among voters who said they had heard at least something about Tuesday's debate, 53% said Harris won and 24% said Trump won, with the rest saying neither had or not answering at all. Now, some 52% of those familiar with the debate said Trump stumbled and didn't appear sharp, while 21% said that of Harris.
Meanwhile, U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland has rejected accusations that the Justice Department has been weaponized against Republicans. He also condemned increasingly dangerous threats to the employees of the Justice Department.
And for more on this, our correspondent Susan Tehrani has sent us this report. Listen in.
Former President Donald Trump has announced that he will not be participating in a second debate with Kamala Harris, saying that he clearly won and that Harris should focus on her job as vice president. Meanwhile, Harris says that they owe voters another debate as polls show a tight race with just 2 months left to the election. The first debate saw Harris frequently attack the former president, but she also evaded a lot of questions, despite his campaign surrogates saying that President Trump welcomed another debate. He said that he won't be doing it, citing rigged conditions. Trump also said that winners never ask for a rematch, something that the Harris team obviously disagrees with, saying that they would only get closer to the White House if they have another debate. Susan Tehrani reporting from New York for WION World is One.
In India, Mamata Banerjee, the Chief Minister of India's West Bengal state, has said that she is ready to resign after agitating doctors skipped a meeting with her.
Now, the doctors are protesting following the rape and murder of a female trainee doctor in the state capital, Kolkata, last month. A delegation of the doctors had arrived at the secretariat for the meeting on Thursday evening, but they refused to meet Banerjee as the government had refused one of their demands, the live transmission of the proceedings, that is.
Banerjee reiterated that her government was committed to holding talks with the doctors. She assured that the doctors will not be penalized for not participating in the meeting.
আমি মানুষের স্বার্থে এমনকি নিজে পদত্যাগ করতেও রাজি আছি। আমার মুখ্যমন্ত্রীর পদ চাই না, কিন্তু আমি চাই মানুষ বিচার পাক, তিলোত্তমা বিচার পাক আর সাধারণ মানুষ চিকিৎসা পাক।
Doctors have been demanding justice for the victim and better infrastructure to ensure a safe working environment in hospitals. The body of the female trainee doctor was found at Kolkata's R.G. Kaur Medical College and Hospital in the early hours of August 9th. The incident triggered nationwide demonstrations and pushed the Supreme Court to take suo motu cognizance of the case. Now, it has been more than a month since massive protests in Bangladesh led to the ouster of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina.
And of course, the relations between Dhaka and New Delhi have been strained since then. In the latest, Dhaka has urged the Hindu community to halt Durga Puja related activities, particularly music playing, for the duration of time during Azan and Namaz. The country's Home Affairs advisor made the announcement. Chaudhary said Puja committees have been asked to keep musical instruments and sound systems switched off and that they have agreed.
Now, only last week, Dhaka announced it will not export hilsa fish to India during the festive season. Now, hilsa is a popular delicacy in the eastern part of India, and its consumption increases during the festival of Durga Puja. In 2023, Bangladesh exported over 3,500 tons of hilsa fish to India. Now, hilsa imports from Bangladesh are constantly on the rise since 2021. India and China have agreed to redouble efforts to ensure complete disengagement on the contested Himalayan frontier.
And this is after India's National Security Advisor Ajit Doval met China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi in Russia. Doval conveyed to Wang Yi that peace and tranquility in border areas and respect for the line of actual control are essential for the return of normalcy in bilateral ties. A statement by India's External Affairs Ministry said that both sides agreed to work with urgency and redouble their efforts to realize complete disengagement in the remaining areas.
Doval also met with Russian President Vladimir Putin on the sidelines of the summit in St. Petersburg. Now, Putin said he has been eagerly waiting to meet Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to attend the BRICS summit in the Russian city of Kazan later this year. Putin proposed holding a bilateral summit with Prime Minister Modi on October 22nd.
We are waiting for Mr. Modi in Kazan. I suggest we also hold a bilateral meeting on October 22nd.
According to the statement released by the Russian embassy in New Delhi, Putin sought a bilateral with Prime Minister Modi to summarize the outcomes of joint work on the implementation of the agreements reached during his visit to Moscow and to outline prospects for the near future.
Prime Minister Modi's visit to Ukraine last month was also part of the bilateral talks between the two leaders. NSA Doval delivered a special message from Prime Minister Modi to President Putin.
The BRICS spirit of mutual respect and understanding, solidarity, equality, openness, inclusiveness, and consensus remains our guiding light as we deliberate today on many crucial issues.
Doval participated in the meeting of BRICS and BRICS Plus high-level security officials, which was held from September 10th to September 12th. Apart from NSA Doval, the Russian president had a bilateral meeting with the Chinese foreign minister and Iranian NSA.
Inclusiveness and consensus.
All right, let's start with a question now. How would you feel one morning you wake up and your favorite coffee jar is empty when you filled it to the brim the night before?
Well, I don't think it's going to be a good feeling, but in Uganda, this is happening on the coffee farms. Farmers are tackling with a challenge, coffee theft. But why? Watch our next report to know more about it.
In the lush landscapes of Uganda, coffee farmers are facing an unprecedented challenge: theft. As global coffee prices soar, so does the risk for those who grow this vital crop. Coffee theft in Uganda has reached alarming levels this year. According to two major farming associations, the thefts have hit unprecedented levels. The root cause? Soaring coffee prices. Global prices for Robusta coffee, a variety favored for instant drinks, have hit their highest levels since the 1970s. This price spike has driven up farm gate prices in Uganda, where unshelled Robusta beans, known locally as kiboko, have surged by up to 65% this year, reaching a record 7,000 shillings or $1.89 per kilogram. The rising coffee prices have made farms highly attractive targets for thieves. This surge in theft has created significant insecurity among farmers. While exact statistics on coffee theft are scarce, farming associations report a sharp increase compared to previous years. The police and government have yet to publish comprehensive data, but the trend is clear. Food and beverage theft is becoming a global issue. Last year, over 20% of all stolen products worldwide were food and drink items, up from 17% in 2022. In response, Ugandan farmers are turning to innovative security measures. Some are employing night guards, installing fencing, and even using bees to deter thieves. The buzzing hives are meant to scare off would-be robbers, adding a layer of protection. The impact of theft extends beyond immediate loss. Thieves often strip beans from trees, damaging branches and reducing future productivity. Additionally, quality suffers when unripe cherries are stolen, affecting both farm income and the market. The government aims to boost coffee production by 20 million bags by 2030, up from less than 7 million now. But theft could undermine these efforts and deter farmers from investing in their crops. As the global coffee market grapples with high prices and rising thefts, the resilience of Uganda's coffee farmers is put to the test. Their struggle highlights a broader issue in the global food supply chain, where rising costs are driving crime and impacting livelihoods. Business Bureau, WION World is One.
Europe faces a reality check as its weak auto market is set to face more closures now.
Now, Volkswagen is the latest to threaten job cuts in Germany and warn it may shutter factories there for the very first time. A Bloomberg News review of auto data revealed that over a third of the main passenger car facilities from the 5 largest European automakers, BMW, Mercedes, Benz, Stellantis, Renault, and have been underutilized last year. Now, this means they produced less than half of the vehicles they were capable of making. In addition to worries that the region is experiencing a long slump due to lagging behind rivals, the closure of sites will heighten these fears. The European market is still 3 million vehicles short of where it was before the crisis hit. Now, this means factories are sitting idle and thousands of jobs might be in danger.
On Tuesday, Volkswagen ended the decades-long employment guarantees that German workers had. Manufacturers need to cut costs in Europe if they want to be competitive in the face of a sudden drop in demand for electric vehicles and increased competition in 2 important export markets, United States and China. Chinese automakers, spearheaded by BYD, are making a strong push into the region following Tesla's Model Y's best-selling status last year. The possibility of closures in Europe has risen in recent years. Labour shortages have driven up labour costs and energy prices have risen from already high levels due to the Ukraine war. The situation looks especially dire in Germany, where automakers and their suppliers struggle with the shift to EVs after leading for decades on well-engineered combustion engine cars.
Now let's take a look at the developments from the world of technology. The United States government has seized more than 350 websites for illegally selling and importing gun conversion devices. Now, these websites were found to be selling gun parts illegally imported from China. Now, as per reports, the gun parts such as silencers were being used by people to convert semi-automatic pistols into fully automatic machine guns. As part of the investigation, U.S. law enforcement conducted undercover purchases from these websites. Officers discovered that most of these shipments falsely described their contents as containing materials like a necklace or toy. Moreover, many of the websites sold counterfeit goods and misused gun manufacturer Glock Inc.'s trademark to suggest the switches were produced by the company, when in reality they were not.
British Telecom, one of Europe's leading broadband companies, has revealed that they spot over 2,000 signals of potential cyber attacks across networks every second. Additionally, the company said that criminals were increasingly using disposable bots to try to evade existing blocking and security measures. BT further revealed that this July, digital surveillance activity by hackers was 1,200% higher than last year's July, with hackers mostly targeting the retail, education, hospitality, defense and finance sectors.
Several major video game companies, including Epic Games and Roblox, are facing a consumer complaint in the European Union. The complaint accuses these companies of misleading players, especially children, into spending money. This action follows growing concerns about gaming addiction, with some parents alleging that game developers intentionally design products to make them addictive. The European Consumer Organization, along with 22 member groups from the countries like France, Italy, Spain, and Germany, has filed a complaint with the European Commission. The complaint also includes other gaming companies like Microsoft's Activision, Blizzard, Ubisoft, and Supercell.